CEO was stunned to see the man helping her father. She'd fired him just 5 days ago. 5 days after firing him, the CEO expected never to see him again. But when she pulled into her father's driveway that bright Saturday morning, she froze. Standing beside an old wooden workbench was the very man she had dismissed from her company without a second thought. His sleeves were rolled up, his hands were covered in sawdust, and he was helping her elderly father move a heavy table saw from the back of a pickup truck. Her father was smiling at him like he had known him for years. The CEO could not understand what she was seeing. The man she had called an unreliable employee was now the person helping the one man in the world she trusted most. And what she didn't know was that the truth behind his firing would soon force her to question everything she believed about success, loyalty, and kindness. If you believe that kindness deserves a second chance and that one good act can change someone's life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to Beyond Kindness for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters. The man's name was Daniel Carter, a skilled maintenance worker who had spent nearly 6 years working for one of the largest construction companies in the city. The company belonged to a powerful young CEO named Emily Harrison, a woman known for her intelligence, discipline, and relentless determination. Emily had built the company after taking over from her father, Richard, who had originally started it from a tiny garage with nothing more than a toolbox, an old truck, and a dream. Emily loved her father deeply, but she had changed after becoming CEO. Every deadline mattered. Every contract mattered. Every dollar mattered. She believed emotions had no place in business because emotions could make people weak. Daniel had always been different from the executives around him. He was quiet, dependable, and the kind of employee who stayed late without asking for praise. He repaired broken equipment, helped younger workers learn their jobs, and often noticed problems before anyone else did. But 5 days earlier, everything had changed. Daniel had been responsible for preparing an important piece of machinery before a major client inspection. That morning, he had arrived late, and the machine had not been ready when Emily arrived. She had been furious. She did not know that Daniel had spent the previous night at a hospital with his elderly mother after she suffered a medical emergency. He had barely slept, but he still came to work because he was afraid of losing his job. When Emily confronted him, he tried to explain, but she was already under enormous pressure. Without asking another question, she fired him. On the spot, Daniel walked out of the company building, carrying a small cardboard box containing the few belongings he had kept in his locker. He did not argue. He did not blame anyone. He simply lowered his eyes and walked away. What Emily never saw was Daniel sitting alone in his truck afterward, fighting back tears because he did not know how he would pay his mother's medical bills. He had worked for years believing that loyalty mattered. That afternoon, he wondered if loyalty had ever mattered to anyone else. The next morning, Daniel received an unexpected phone call from Richard Harrison, Emily's father. Richard had once known Daniel through the company and respected his work. He had heard what happened, but instead of judging Daniel, he asked him for a favor. Richard had been restoring old woodworking equipment at his home and needed help repairing a large table saw that had belonged to his own father. Daniel agreed immediately. He did not ask for money. He simply wanted to help an old man who had always treated him with respect. For the next several days, Daniel worked in Richard's garage, repairing broken parts, replacing worn pieces, and carefully restoring the machine. Richard discovered that Daniel was not only talented with machinery, but also deeply compassionate. The two men spent hours talking while they worked, and Daniel slowly began to feel that maybe losing his job had not destroyed his life after all. That Saturday morning, Emily arrived at her father's house expecting to find him resting. Instead, she saw Daniel standing beside the pickup truck. Her first reaction was anger. She wondered why a man she had fired was now working on her father's property. Then she noticed something that stopped her. Richard was struggling to move the heavy machine, and Daniel immediately stepped forward to help him. He carefully positioned himself between the old man and the weight, making sure Richard would not hurt his back. There was no audience. No company executives were watching. Daniel was not trying to impress anyone. He was simply helping. Emily stood there silently, watching the man she had dismissed 5 days earlier protect her father as though he were family. For the first time since becoming CEO, she felt ashamed of a decision she had made without knowing the whole story. She remembered Daniel standing in her office, trying to explain why he had been late. She remembered cutting him off. She remembered telling him that the company needed people who could be counted on. Now she realized she had never bothered to ask what had happened. Richard noticed Emily standing near the driveway and smiled. He introduced her to Daniel, as though there were no tension between them. Emily could barely speak. She looked at Daniel's worn jacket, his scratched hands, and the tired expression on his face. Then she noticed his phone vibrating repeatedly. Daniel glanced at the screen and quietly stepped away. Emily did not hear the entire conversation, but she understood enough to realize that his mother was still struggling with medical problems. Suddenly, the truth became painfully clear. Daniel had not been careless that morning. He had been trying to save his mother. Emily felt something inside her break. She had spent years building a company around efficiency, but she had forgotten that every employee was a human being, carrying a story she could not see. She had judged Daniel by one morning instead of 6 years of loyalty. Richard later told her that Daniel had never complained about being fired. He had only said that he hoped the company would succeed, and that he was grateful for the years he had spent there. That confession hurt Emily more than anger ever could have. The following Monday, Emily did something she had rarely done. She admitted she was wrong. She called Daniel and asked him to come back to the company, but Daniel hesitated. He told her that he needed more than a job. He needed to know that his work and his circumstances would be respected. Emily understood. She offered him his position back, but she also created a new employee assistance program for workers facing family emergencies, medical crises, and financial hardship. She personally funded the first stage of the program and made sure every manager in the company understood that productivity could never be more important than a person's dignity. Daniel eventually returned, but his return was not the same as before. He was no longer simply an employee who followed orders. Emily began asking for his ideas, and Daniel helped redesign the company's equipment safety program. His practical knowledge saved the company thousands of dollars and prevented several accidents. But the greatest change happened outside the office. Emily began visiting her father more often. She listened to his stories. She stopped checking her phone during their conversations. She finally understood that her father had spent his entire life building something that was not measured by money. Months later, Richard's restored table saw stood proudly in his workshop. Daniel had finished the restoration, and Emily had framed a photograph of the three of them standing beside it. Whenever she looked at that picture, she remembered the morning she had driven into the driveway and seen the man she had fired, helping the father she loved. It reminded her that people are often carrying battles we cannot see, and that one moment of patience can prevent a lifetime of regret. Sometimes the person we dismiss is the very person who later teaches us the lesson we needed most. Daniel lost his job in a moment, but he never lost his kindness. Emily had power, money, and a successful company, but Daniel showed her something far more valuable. Character is not measured by what we do when people are watching. It is measured by what we choose to do when nobody is watching. If this story touched your heart, please support the video with a like, share it with someone who may need a second chance, and subscribe to Beyond Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach people who need a reminder that compassion still matters. And before the story ends, leave a comment saying, "Kindness deserves a second chance." If you believe that people should be given the opportunity to explain their struggles before they are judged. Because sometimes, the person we fire today may be the person who reminds us tomorrow what it truly means to be human.